Hi, I'm Laura Beth Wells, and this is Theater Thursdays. This month is all things Blithe Spirit. Today we're talking with Margo Birdwhistell, the costume designer for Blithe Spirit. Hi, Margo.
Hi, Laura Beth. Thanks for having me.
Hello again. I'm Laura Beth Wells, and this is Theater Thursdays. I am an actor with the Clarence Brown Theater Company, as well as an adjunct lecturer at the University of Tennessee, and I played Mrs. Bradman in Blithe Spirit. Today we're talking with Margo Birdwhistell, our costume designer. Tell us a little bit about yourself, Margo.
Hi, my name is Margo Birdwhistell. I am a third-year costume design grad student at the University of Tennessee, and like Laura Beth said, I was the costume designer for our production of Blithe Spirit.
Excellent. Wonderful. Before we begin, I'd like to say that I'm coming to you from Knoxville, Tennessee, the native lands of the Yuchi and Muskogee Creek people, as well as the Cherokee Nations. Margo, what was the process like creating and designing this production of Blithe Spirit? Obviously, a big thing. And we talked about this last month in December with Christmas Carol, the ghosts. And I like this theme coming through. And we're talking about ghosts again, because the ghosts are such a huge part of this production. What was that process like? What were the aesthetics you were going for with the ghosts costumes? And what challenges came up in the design process?
Yeah, well, my first step in designing any character is to sort of bring their personality through. So before designing Elvira as a ghost, I sort of had to design her as a person, think of her personality and think of the context in which she died, because those are the clothes she would be wearing. So then sort of, talking to the director, talking about these ghosts appearing as sort of a grayscale figure amongst the colorful world that they take place. So there was a lot of trial and error working with the actress. Katie Cunningham was very cooperative and doing so many different makeup trials. We tried face paints in different shades and tones. And then it ended up just being, we used a very pale foundation and then sort of used some grays and darker colors to contour her. And that sort of, along with the wig and the costume in different shades of gray, just sort of made her appear like, a scale photo in the midst of everything else. So it was a lot of playing around with things, definitely.
And that actually, you bring up an interesting point. Is another question I wanted to ask. In a lot of course, every theater is different in terms of how it's set up. But at the CBT, we don't have a separate wig and makeup designer. Generally, that's done by the costume designer. How is that process? Because especially with this, because you just talked about it, the wig and the makeup were so integral to this design. How is that process of creating those designs different from designing clothing? And how are they similar, and how do they relate?
Mhm. Well, when I'm designing, I typically I think of myself as a costume designer, but I also think of myself as a character designer. So I am designing, the entirety of the character. And obviously, some of that may change with casting. You have to take into account who is actually playing that character,
Mhm.
and you can sort of incorporate the actor's personality and, what they look like into that character. So a lot of it is just looking into the hair and makeup of the period we're working for, what sort of vibe each character has, and then sending those research images. For the show, we sent them off to a wig stylist that we've worked with a lot before. So he sent us the wigs, and then just sort of, expanding on that with the makeup as well.
That's fascinating. I love how you describe it as a character designer,
Mhm.
because it really is. I mean, I know for me, um, the dress that you built and designed for Mrs. Bradman for that first scene
Mhm.
was gorgeous, and fit me like a glove. But what I loved about it, which I thank you for, but what I loved about it was the fabric. It had little fairies on it. And
Yeah.
no one from the audience could see that, but it was so Mrs. Bradman.
Mhm.
And that
Definitely.
influence, I remember seeing it, because of course, fittings are some of the first times that the actors interact with the creative team and what the final
Mhm.
product's gonna look like. And seeing that fabric, seeing that, I was like, oh, I know who this woman is. It exactly, you're exactly right. It's a character designer, which is a perfect segue to speaking of one of the iconic characters from this play, Madame Arcati. We spoke with Carol Mayo Jenkins, who played the role, and we talked with her about how how the costume influenced her character work. Talk to us about the influences with that character in particular. What were the challenges in designing that character? What did you discover along the way? Talk to us a bit about your process.
Yeah, so early on, I met with Carol Maya Jenkins and Sharon Ott, our director, and we sat down and we just talked about the character of Madame Arcati. So we talked about, is she genuine? And she truly believes that she is a medium. Like, even if she had no powers whatsoever, she believes that she is genuine. So she's a very, despite her quirkiness, she's a very serious character. She's very smart. She's very traveled. So we sort of took parts from that conversation. Carol had mentioned she thought she saw her traveling a lot. So some of the fabrics we used in her costume were, textiles from India. Her vest in her second outfit had sort of an African feel to it. And then different accessory aspects. Her headpiece that she wore at the seance was sort of a mixture between different shamanistic headdresses and the sort of cloche beaded headdress that a lot of people wore in the 1920s. And also, when dealing with Madame Arcati, she is a very physical character. She rides her bike everywhere, it's mentioned in the script. So just thinking about what she would be wearing, she would always be wearing pants, and sort of thinking about different style icons from that period and a little before. We went back into the 1920s. Marlene Dietrich, very famous actress from the 1920s, was known for wearing these really great sort of baggy suits that gave her this imposing and serious presence.
That's so fascinating to me because you're right. And again, it comes back. I keep coming to, I love that term that you use, the character designer, because it is like all these unspoken things that are part of who this woman is. That are expressed through her clothing, which I find fast, because we do that in life. Like, I think, oh, I got this necklace here and I bought this shirt there, and and they all have stories behind them. And I just find that fascinating that those stories carry through when we're playing dress up and playing characters on stage. About the other characters in the piece, we talked briefly at the beginning about the ghosts. So you have one ghost, Elvira, who is always a ghost. She appears, she is a ghost, and she's always a ghost. And then there's Ruth. Ruth starts out alive, and then, spoiler alert, if you didn't see the show, she ends up dead. It's very specific in the script about how she appears, and she's in the exact same thing she was, only now it's in these shades of gray. What was that process like? How did you navigate with both the director and the actor, but then also your team in the costume shop? How did you navigate that process?
Well, Ruth was actually a very interesting character to design. She is so fancy. All of her costumes were sort of taken out of the most fashionable magazines of the period. And I sort of followed a trend with her throughout the show. She starts out in this very beautiful, flowy dress, and then she becomes a little more closed off as the action of the play takes place. So she becomes a little more stuffy, a little more covered up. And by the time that she leaves to go die, she's, all covered up. She's wearing the suit and a scarf and a hat and gloves. She's all done up. And then, so taking that outfit, and I did all the renderings digitally, so it was very easy to just change it to be a grayscale rendering. And then from there, you have to find two of the same fabric in a different tone. She had embroidery and different scarf textures. So finding a scarf that had blue flowers on it and then changing it to something with gray flowers on it, and just sort of transitioning that so it was the exact same thing, just in taken through a grayscale wash. Was very interesting.
It was, and just gorgeous. I remember I just standing backstage because I would see her after I'd come off from Miss, and just see her, and it just, the shades of gray, I think, were beautiful, because you think, oh, the gray, but the shades of gray were just stunning, and the way it worked with the lights, the costumes just beautiful, works of art.
Thank you.
Margo, thank you so much for being with us today. We really appreciate you being here.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us for Theater Thursdays. We'll be talking all this month about Blithe Spirit, so keep coming back. Thank you.